Live.
All right. Well, welcome to the first episode of Add Water and Stir with Mimi from the blog ComplicatedMelodi. And I'm ABM from Adoptive Black Mom. And we are so excited.
We
Mimi,
are
aren't you
excited.
excited?
It's the premiere version of our podcast. I'm excited.
This is so cool. So, if you've been following either or both of our blogs, you know that we announced this venture a couple of days ago. And my wonderful co-blogger and co-host has actually came up with the name Add Water and Stir, and we can get into why it's named that in a bit. But Mimi reached out to me 6 months ago or so, and I'd been following her blog. She followed mine, and there are not that many women of color talking about adoption out in the blogosphere. And so we kind of found each other, and she started writing. She wrote this great blog on Best Man Holiday, and I was like, we should do a movie, and she was like, I got another idea, and so we kind of sat on it because I was in the middle of writing a dissertation, and then after that was all done and at least some dust settled, because the dust never seems to settle, but some settled, Mimi reached out with this idea about doing a blog. And so, Mimi, why don't you tell the folks who are joining us either live or will listen later what we're here to talk about?
Well, the idea I listen to a lot of podcasts. If you read my blog, you know that I'm a podcast junkie. And I felt like there's a black community of podcasters, but not really ones that are focused on adoption. And I felt like it was an opportunity for us to have a voice about what we're doing. We could talk, we both adopted from foster care, so it's an opportunity for us to really let people know what foster care is about and see people that look like them that are doing foster care or adoption, and so they can have some resources and basically educate community about what it's like to adopt and add an African American or a person of color's perspective to it. So I'm excited about what we're doing here. I feel like it can catch on, and I feel like we really have an opportunity to broaden, people's understanding about adoption.
Great. Yes, I am down with the cause. So, Mimi, why don't we do a little bit of an introduction of ourselves and kind of where we are in our own adoptive situation. So why don't you tell the folks what's going on with you?
Well, I started this path. Um, we started the path maybe a little over a year ago with starting with our Pride classes, which is the training that we have to take. So we did that in April of last year. And right now, we replaced with a 2-year-old in March of this year. So we have a 2-year-old little girl. She is an adoptive placement. Her name is Naga on the blog, and we just love her. We can't wait to adopt her, and so we're just really waiting. We're in the process right now. I'm just waiting the 6 months that we have to wait in order to adopt a baby. So
Awesome. I'm so excited to hear
I'm
about Nana. And I
excited.
love reading about her. She just sounds so cute.
We're halfway through, so I'm really
Wow.
excited.
6 months goes fast. So,
What about you? Where are you?
I am adoptive black mom, and I actually started the process. I dropped off my very, very first bit of paperwork for my agency in January 7th, 2013. And unlike a lot of adoption stories, mine moved really fast. It
Mm-hmm.
moved
It did.
really, really fast. And so I did my Pride in the early spring, and home study was done in June. I actually got Hope's initial profile at the end of July. We were matched at the end of August. I visited in October, and she was placed with me. It was a cross-country placement, but she was placed with me in January, and we actually did not have to wait the entire 6 months. We just finalized earlier this month, so we are done. We're done. I have my final decree. We just got the revised birth certificate. We are signed, sealed, and delivered. and it's kind of crazy.
Congratulations. I mean, that's awesome. I'm waiting to get to that point because we're still in the process of monthly visits from caseworkers,
Yeah,
paperwork, and all that stuff.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
can't wait to cross over.
It is really very cool. And so we, of course, she has a social worker, and then I have a social worker here. And we are doing a taper off of the social work visits. So our social worker came to see us maybe 2 weeks ago, right after finalization, just to kind of really kind of to celebrate. And it was
Hmm.
interesting because it was kind of, we were so low key. And I think it was just because it was so exciting. And it was almost unbelievable that it happened, and that the whole process came down to like less than 10 pages, a check, and 6 minutes on FaceTime. Like, and it was done. like I
I cannot wait. As a matter of fact, just as an update, the caseworker called me today, and they are bringing our redacted files tomorrow.
Oh yes, we have to
Yes.
tell people about the whole redacted files and the binders full of kids' information.
Yes, and it sounds like I'm gleeful about it, but I'm gleeful because typically, and maybe one day we'll do a podcast and we can walk through the whole process of going adopting from foster care. But I'm excited because it's been taking a long time. There was a backlog of getting redacted files, and redacted files are the files that tell you about your whole child's history, but they have to go through and black out maybe family members' names or people unrelated to the case. Is that what
Mhm.
happened? Because I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
And depending on how long they're in care, you could have boxes and boxes of files to go through. But
yeah,
really, the state wants to make sure that you understand everything that the child has gone through, so you don't
yeah,
come back later and say, I didn't know that this happened or that they have a history of this and everything. So they want to make sure you have all the information
yeah,
before you make your final decision. So
yeah.
I'm excited about it. Even though we're not ready to adopt, we still have another 3 months, but that's one thing that's out the way.
Yeah, I got the disclosure. We call it disclosure forms here, and it was just the single binder. But I will say that folks should know that depending again on how long the child has been in care, as well as kind of what all has happened during that time, it can be a binder, a single binder like I got, or it could be boxes.
Hmm.
Because I know someone in a support group that I participate in, she got 7 boxes, and the child is 7.
Wow.
And I couldn't imagine what was all in the 7 boxes. But it made me also think about how much might have been missing from Hope's file.
Oh.
So that's something too that because there was a previous adoption placement that didn't work out, and no information was in the file about that. And so it really does kind of make you think, oh gee, what's not in here, even if you apparently have 7 boxes. So
Right.
it's something for people to think about.
I never thought about that. I know, well, just even with our placement, she was in another foster care placement before she came to us, and we didn't really receive anything, even though it was almost a personal handoff. We still really didn't receive pictures,
Oh
medical
wow.
records, and things like that. So that can happen just person
Yeah.
to person. No, and if someone's been in foster care for years, there could be a lot of things that are
Yeah.
missing.
Yeah. So Mimi, why don't you tell us why you and your hubby chose to adopt?
Ooh, okay. Well, if you read my blog, you'll know that I have a personal relationship with foster care. It's touched our family in very intimate ways. So I've always wanted to adopt and adopt from foster care. And my husband and I have been together since 2003, or we've been dating since 2003. And when I told him that, he was like, okay, okay. Whatever I have to say to make this happen. If you want to adopt, that's fine. Yeah. Well, move on. What, 10 years? And we started working on a biological family, and we ran into some fertility issues, which actually pushed adoption up a little bit earlier. So even though it was always in the plan, it probably wasn't in the plan immediately. So I wanted to adopt because, like I said, I have that personal relationship with people with foster care, and I wanted to make sure that I could provide a safe home and a safe place for someone.
Mm, okay. All
What
right.
about you?
Well, I also had planned on adopting, but I thought that it would be after I had some biological kids, and well, after I found Mr. Right, after I'd had like a great honeymoon,
All the
like it was
list
a couple
list of
of
things.
yeah, the honeymoon that lasted a couple of years where we could enjoy each other, and then we would have some kids, and then pursue adoption to round out our family. Well, I kind of looked up in my late 30s, and Mr. Right did not appear. He was not there.
Yet. He
There had
wasn't
been
there
a
yet.
right there, there had been a Mr. We might try this, but but
Some
but
Mr.
Mr.
Wrongs.
Mr. Wrongs, ABM's training program for other people's future husbands. Like, and I realized that, well, gee, I wasn't married, so might I pursue this on my own? And then I kind of really still between 35 and 40 said I really am enjoying this single life, and I have the furry one, the dog, and life is pretty good. But a couple of years ago I went through a major medical scare, and it required a pretty invasive surgery, and it was a real life crucible that just kind of changed everything. It just was a major game changer as I was also stepping into 40, which by itself is a game changer. It's a
Hmm.
good one for anybody that's afraid of 40. Don't be. The water is great. So, but but it wasn't until after the surgery and after my doctors were like, "You're going to be fine. It's great," that I said, "Okay, great. Well, gee, I'm going to be 40. Let's move on, like seeing if I can go ahead and do IVF or something like that." And, my doctors were like, "Oh, you wanted to have a kid? Hmm. Did we not mention that the surgery was so invasive?" And so,
Sorry.
yeah. And so it was really kind of, I went through a period of kind of thinking, gee, you know, maybe I can do this, maybe I can't. And then I said, well, you know what? I always really wanted to pursue this avenue, so let's make it happen. It's time. And it was a really compressed period of time to make that decision, but I kind of jumped on it and never looked back. It was a little crazy. I look back on it and I'm like, gee, I wonder if, I mean, I know I made the right decision, but I'm kind of like, the timing of it was a little stressful.
So, did you consider adoption before you looked into fertility or having a biological child? Like, was it something that you always wanted to do, or was it something that you came to?
No, it was always something that was going to be an addition to my family. I
Okay.
thought that I would have biological kids, so it was always a part of the plan. And I really can't really say why. It wasn't like I just kind of, it just always seemed like I always wanted to adopt. I don't ever remember not wanting to adopt a child. And in fact, in my early 30s, when my mom was like, when am I going to have when am I going to start reproducing so
Hmm.
that we could have grandchildren? And I promised her at 35 that I would, if nothing had happened by then, I would adopt. And at 35, she was like, so what's
What?
up?
What? I think my mother went through a grieving period. Like, I don't. At a certain age, I think all the other people were having their grandkids, and she was a teacher, so she said, other people are talking at the lunch table, and I don't have any stories to tell.
It always comes back to the lunch table, no matter how old you are. And so,
I'm like, do you feel lonely, Mom? I'm sorry that we can't help you out right now. So,
so Mimi, I know that Nana is, how old is Nana, and how did you choose the age range that you focused on?
ooh, Nana is 2. She's 2 years old, or 2.5, and when she came, she was probably fairly newly 2. And our age range was 0 to 2. So actually, when we were presented with her, we were like, she's 2 already. So we weren't really sure about it, but I guess God was just kind of directing our path that way. We really were interested in doing um, adopting an infant. So we were interested in 0 to 2. That's what we told that we were interested in. And of course, we were told then that it would be challenging for us to get a
Hmm.
a little baby unless we were interested in doing, straight foster care with the opportunity to maybe adopt. And we were a little scared of that, and I think a lot of people are because with straight foster care, there's a lot of possibility that the child could be reunified with their parents, which is really the goal of foster care.
Hmm.
So we were scared that we would get attached to like a little baby, but we persisted and we were open, but we were presented with this 2 year old, and that's just who it was supposed to be. I mean, she's fit into our family. She's just, my mother said to me yesterday, she said, it just feels like she's been with you guys all the time. And I'm like,
Oh,
I know, it's just, she's just melded into our family. So
wow.
it's hard for us to remember, even though she's only been with us for 3 months, what that felt like when she wasn't here.
Before. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Hope just turned 13 yesterday.
Yay! Happy birthday, Hope.
Wow.
And I heard she had a fabulous birthday, and I'm jealous.
She did have a fabulous birthday. We went to the Katy Perry concert in DC yesterday, and yeah, Roar.
Yes. Yes.
Which incidentally, as an aside, like, don't sleep on Katy Perry. The girl's vocals are bad. She is
Mm.
awesome. Like, and she puts on a fantastic show. It was great. But if you also have sensory overload problems like me, bring sunglasses.
It's just too much happening. It seems like a lot of teenagers would be there too.
It was a lot of teenagers, a lot of moms and daughters, some dads and daughters, which I thought was awesome. It
Oh.
was very sweet. But yeah, at some point she was like, "Are you sleeping?" Like, I have my sunglasses on, and I was like, it's a little too much. I just need to, just need a moment."
Yes.
um,
Continue
but
on with your yelling and screaming. I'm just relaxing.
glow sticks, it was crazy. Anyway, so originally I had planned on, my original plan was to adopt maybe between the ages of 5 and maybe 8. And I didn't want to do traditional foster for the reasons that you mentioned. I really was just terrified of getting attached and then letting go, and I was like, I just didn't think that I was built
Hmm.
for that. And I do believe that there are families that are called to that mission of, like, and they are able to kind of let the child go back off, and and that's their gift. But I am not blessed that way. That was not my
Hmm.
calling. And so I went through a private agency, and they had a program that focused on older child adoption and focusing on older children who were already legally free. And so, when I went in and I said, "Hey, I want this 5 to 8 year old. Here she is going to be cute." I thought it was going to be a little boy. I could just see him in my head. It was going to be so
A little
great.
boy,
I
really?
thought I was going to get a boy, and like, I don't know. It was crazy. I thought I was going to get a boy, and they said, yeah, so if you're not planning to do foster to adopt, then you're going to have to let that 5-year-old situation go. It's not
That's
really,
interesting. Even at 5, they felt like that was
yeah,
still too young
yeah,
for an African American child.
that I didn't want to foster that was already legally free.
Mm.
And so I said, okay. And they were like, if we really would encourage you to think about this particular older child program that we have. And the average age was 10. And, I thought about it and everything. And I said, every now and then they get a younger child. I'm just going to go with the flow, and I will know my kid. And so when they sent me this picture of this beautiful African American 12-year-old, and I knew the moment that I saw her picture, it was the very first profile, and I thought, man, it can't possibly be. And like, she's 12. Like, what the heck am I going to do with a 12-year-old?
Mm. Go to Katy
And
Perry concerts.
can't go to Katy Perry concert, go to be a kitty cat. But it just she was my kid. She was my kid. She was my kid. And so I kind of fell into the older child thing, or at least that was my calling. And again, she was already the program that I'm in. It's not really. I mean, our placement was not considered a foster placement. It was considered an adoption placement, and with just the waiting period. And again, they said 6 months, and we actually did it in about 4.5. And so, yeah, it wasn't kind of the way that I thought. Just like you know, you kind of go to the top of your range. I went I went double my range.
Right.
So, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and Nana, she's also legally free for adoption,
Oh,
which is strange, right? That typically doesn't happen.
hmm,
Um, so that also was it's a blessing. That's why our process has been going so fast because now we just need to wait out the 6 months
wow.
that she needs to stay in our care before we can legally adopt her. And
Yeah.
while you guys were able to do it in 4 months, they were like, no, it's
So,
6 months. It's a hard and fast rule. So we're
yeah,
just gonna wait it out.
my agency really encouraged us to wait, and they were like, you know, some families go wait all the way until like 8 months. And I was like, you know, what we really needed was permanence, and
Hmm.
her state of origin was just like, let's roll. Like you said, I mean, we've gone through some things. If and some of the stuff I've written about specifically on the blog, and some things I haven't. We've gone through some pretty crazy times, but she's my kid. Like you said
Right.
with Nana, like I was like, I'm not gonna put her back on a plane. I'm not gonna give her back. She's staying
Mm.
here. We're in it to win it. And so, you know, her originating state just said, let's roll with it. And so it happened fast. Yeah.
And that feeling of that's your kid. You already have kind of this feeling of, um, trying to get permanence for them.
Hmm.
Actually, was Nana the way it happened. She came to us for an overnight visit, and I had already taken off work. So she came to us for an overnight visit. Sorry, a weekend visit. So we kept her till Sunday. And I was like, well, I'm off of work. Can I just keep her to Monday? And, we got clearance from everybody involved. So I kept her to Monday. And then they said they were going to place her the next weekend. I said, well, can I just keep her? And so she came for an overnight visit. And we kept her. We kept her here with us because we just felt like she belonged here, and why send her back? And we just, you just already start loving this being,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So, where do you think people like us fit into the larger adoption community?
uh, our story is not widely known. I don't know why that is. I think it's because we've been doing, and when I say we, I mean maybe like the African American community have been doing adoption informally for so long.
Sure.
Perhaps we've always been taking care of other people's kids. So, it's a long-standing tradition. And so, in some ways, I think people are like, well, what's there to talk about?
Right.
We've been doing this all the time, but
Yeah.
nothing special about what you're doing.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
I do think, what'd you say?
No, go ahead.
I do think that there is space, or we need to make space for our voices there, because I'm starting to see more of our stories becoming mainstreamed. I watch a
Mhm.
lot of television, too much television actually. So I'm starting to see the adoption story happen a lot more on television, adoption in general, but also adoption within the Black community
Mhm.
um, start to come up more. So I think the door is widening for us to start telling our story and letting people know that there are other people like us um, out here, that there are some differences, that it's nice to have someone else to connect with that can support. Um, so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure if we have a place yet, but I think we're trying to make a space for ourselves.
Well, I think it's I think our place does already exist, and I think that there has been I think in community a normalization of parenting other people's kids.
Right.
You got grandma, you got auntie, you got big sis, you got big brother, you know, you have all of these people, and you have a lot of kinship adoptions that may or may not be formalized. And then, you know, we won't even talk about the whole history of African Americans in this country parenting other people's kids. That's another
Yes.
podcast. That's another podcast. But I think that space is there. But as you said, it's been so kind of a part of the interwoven history that nobody really talks about it. And it's not so much that it's taboo, it just is something that happens. I do think that there is a space probably to talk about some of the more formal adoptions that
Hmm.
because I think that the informal and kinship piece is I think that there's a comfort level that exists in the community with that just maybe doesn't need that people don't feel need the discourse that maybe formal adoption has. But I remember for me, I started blogging, and one of the things I kind of went when I said, oh, maybe I'll think about doing a blog about my experiences, and I went to go see who else was out there, and it was like you and Pudding.
Right. Hmm.
Which if anybody's listening, like check Pudding's blog out. I think it's called I used to be
I
a
used to
mother,
be, I was once a mother.
something like that. Yeah, we'll put a link or something about to her blog. She's moving to China. Check her out. But there were just that was it. And so then I was like, okay, well let me go on Amazon and type up like, are there any adoption
You were
books?
looking
And it was
for
like
some books.
I was looking for books because surely somebody has written about this. And all I started getting was like brown Cabbage Patch dolls. Like,
Mm-mm.
and so there just wasn't anything out there, and I was just kind of like, well, gosh, surely there's more people than like two talking about this. And then I kind of wondered, is our experience really, is it really that much different than other groups? I think that in reading a lot of other blogs, I think that there's certainly a lot of similarities, but I think that there are some differences as well.
Well, here's a perspective. Perhaps a lot of times people don't talk about it because I don't, maybe we're in a sense passing, right?
Mm,
Because a lot of times we're doing same race adoptions. It's
mhm,
a lot easier for us to walk around in the world unseen. So with me and Nana, nobody really questions me about who my child is because they just assume that she belongs with me. And because we come in all shades, usually there's not a lot of question. It could
yeah.
be anything happening within the family. So um, maybe because people aren't kind of pointed out, it's easy to kind of fly under the radar, and so there's
Hmm.
not a lot of need or maybe opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah.
Versus maybe other cultures, especially when in the transracial adoptive community, people are always asking questions. People are always pointing them out and seeking them out for information. So there may be more of a need to kind of talk about their experiences and find other people to connect with.
Yeah, yeah. I talk about same race adoption privilege in a post that I posted
Hmm.
earlier today, and how Hope and I pass. And we kind of sat next to this really great couple yesterday at the concert, and they were like, "Oh, your mom is so cool." Because she paid a grip for these tickets, but and everything, and it was funny because Hope is old enough where she lived a whole life before she got here,
Right.
and she likes to talk about that life. And so while I pick and choose my transparency in the day-to-day life about talking about adoption, aside from the fact that people that know me, I mean, you don't just get a 12-year-old.
Right.
Like,
Right.
people are like, where did she come from? And so a lot of people realize that know me adopt, but if we're just walking down the street, it's not particularly obvious. But she struggles with this because she chooses to disclose um, that she's adopted, and I'm fine with that and very supportive of it. But in those moments when we're passing and people ask questions that you would just normally ask a non,
Hmm.
maybe a bio family, where everybody looks alike,
Right.
she struggles. I see her struggle with what to say. And
Mm.
it's really kind of interesting. And so, for example, yesterday she was like, the guy was like, oh, do you have any siblings? And there's a whole backstory for her about other family members out there, and she is just kind of like, she was a little bit deer in the headlights.
Hmm. How do I answer this question? I don't,
Right. You
not
know,
living with me, you know.
right. And so, because then people were just, I mean, they were just making small talk,
Right.
but it becomes, a thing for her. And I don't know if I mean, I assume other families have that. Same race families, not just African Americans, but any other
Hmm.
group probably experience that in ways that are different than, oh, you must be adopted because you're different,
Right.
you know. Um, so, and for us, that's one issue.
Hmm. Well, you know, maybe this will allow this podcast, or now that people maybe come to our blog, it'll be more opportunity for people to reach out and say, like the issue that you just brought up, I'm dealing with this issue, I'm not really sure what to tell her to say or how to support her through that. And as far as us, because she's 2, we don't have to really deal with that issue yet, but I'm sure it's one of my fears as she grows up. How do I disclose her adoption story to her?
Oh, yeah.
When do we start talking about it? Because I want it to always be a normal part of her life. It's always something. Oh no, it's always something that she knows about. But when do we start talking about it too? She just might not be ready to learn it, to
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say that I think for me, um, one of the biggest challenges that I deal with is kind of what would life be like if I had adopted a much younger child versus hope, because there's so many questions about who she is that she's having. I mean, and those are some of these things are just by virtue of her age, or just very natural identity issues. Who am I? But for her, they're pretty loaded,
Hmm.
and so I'm actually kind of, and I talk about this a little bit in the blog a few weeks ago, that I've started kind of looking into her genealogy. I have a friend that's kind of helping me out with that, and I don't know what I'm going to do with that information, um, and how I will provide it to her, but I will make it available to her at some point. But it's tough, and it's also kind of, I mean, fortunately it's more recent stuff, but kind of what do you do with the genealogy long term when
Hmm.
those really historical records for African Americans can be shaky after a certain point.
Right.
So it's a
Right.
little kind of crazy. So.
I have another kind of question about that. When you talk about our role in the adoption community, I visit a forum online, and I'm a lurker, so I think I've maybe posted 1 or 2 things. Um, and I wonder, because I've seen how sometimes people respond to other people in those forums, if our opinion would even be welcome sometimes,
Mm.
especially when you're talking about something related to race or culture. So there may be sometimes I'm reading some article about perhaps someone's colorblind philosophy, or you know things like that, and I might want to
Mhm.
chime in, but I'm not. I don't really feel like getting the whole community down on me. So sometimes
Mhm.
I feel like those spaces may not necessarily always be open for that diversity of opinion, because there is kind of a adoption culture, and there may be like a
Yeah.
couple of camps within the adoption culture, but there is an adoption culture that it feels like you need to kind of march in a certain way or you're going to be outside of the culture.
Yes, there is definitely a culture, and I haven't, I know for me as an individual adopted parent, I haven't figured out what my role is, much less kind of added layers of identity of being Black. But I will say that I'm a lurker, because the few times that I have had something to say, um, one, people diverted the questions to ask about my hair, and can I help them with advice for
So
doing
that's
their
the
kids'
only
hair.
only value you bring into the forum is,
Yeah,
well, can you help me? What products should I use?
can you tell me about relaxers? And so, and it's cool, because I guess everybody needs somebody to help with those questions, and I'm
Google, the
fine.
Google, the
The
Google, the Google will help you. That's your friend.
the Google is your friend.
Yes.
But everybody's got to have the person that they can actually ask real life questions, because you don't know who's on the Google. It could be just some random person that just is making up stuff. But whatever. But I get either pushed into that space where I'm a hair consultant, or a few months ago, I had posted. I mean, I was posting under ABM, and I had posted a link to. There was somebody had posted a couple of things, what not to say to adoptive parents, or what not to say to parents of adoptive older kids. And I wrote a post on this when very early when I started blogging, and it's a bit tongue in cheek,
Right.
but it's a bit tongue in cheek, and I'm a smarty pants a bit. So, but I got like somebody went in on me. A couple of people went in on me of being mean, and apparently I am angry ABM.
That's what the ABM stands for, not adopted. Angry black mom. That's what just
Right.
waiting for a chance to call you angry.
Angry, angry, angry. Yes, the A is for angry. And so, they went in. They went in on me about being angry and how, I was like, hey, look, this is tongue in cheek. There's truth here, but have you not heard a satire? Do you not read The Onion? Like, come on, lighten up. Like, I was
Right.
like, there's no lecture needed here. Like, puff pow, be gone. And so, either I can get moved to this space where I can't bring my authentic voice because apparently it's too confrontational and aggressive and angry, or I need to be a hair consultant. And so those are the two spaces where in online communities I seem to have found myself repeatedly. And so yeah, I'm not okay with that. So,
Do you think that if we posted more frequently that we could navigate a space there? I mean, it may be just you're new to the block, and so you know.
well, yeah, because I will say that there is this kind of outsider. Are you because a lot of the adoption groups online, especially like on Facebook, are closed groups,
Mhm.
and people are very sensitive. But I've also noticed, though, that there's this behavior that you see, bullying behavior that you see everywhere. And because I see the bullying behavior in support groups, I see
Right.
bullying behavior, I'm just not inclined to fight for space there.
Okay.
You know, somebody, like, there was a post on Facebook on a group that I'm in about a week and a half ago. Whoa. Um, hello, a week and a half ago, where it was about whether or not you use expectant mom, EM, or birth mom, and when do you use them, at what time, is it before the baby came, and like this innocent woman had posted something, and I mean, they went in on her for 2 days. Like,
It was a question. It was a question. I didn't know.
I just, and I was like, first of all, who has time for that? I don't have time to bully anybody. Like
Hmm.
one adoptive kid is keeping me busy. Like life doesn't begin for me until 9:31 when she's in bed. Like, so I don't have time to bully people. So, I do wonder whether or not, if I were more engaged, what would that look like? But I do see some of that bullying behavior, so I'm kind of pass it up.
You asked a question if our experience is that much different. Like, does it warrant us even trying to make a space or telling a story? And I think from a process standpoint, I don't think the process is different necessarily. In fact, we probably may be a little bit more privileged in the fact that this is not necessarily a positive, but we privileged in the fact that maybe there's more opportunity, or the process may go quicker for us because there are more children of color in the system, right? And so um, there's a privilege in that. That may be the reason why we kind of feel like our stories are progressing very quickly,
Mm,
versus maybe other people who are waiting um, to be matched with, the type of child that they're interested in being matched with. So I think from a process standpoint, probably not different. But I think just in the support aspect, yeah, our story is different. And I
mhm,
think it's always nice to find somebody who can connect with you culturally, that gets your references, that understands where you come from, and maybe can speak to, one of the things I write on my blog is about parenting and trying to change my parenting style from the way that I was raised, which if you follow Black Twitter, sometimes they'll go in and have these kind of little rants about, things your mama said and, stuff like that. And those are things that I can relate to, even though I'm trying to change some of those things with my parenting behavior. And so I think it's good for us to speak about it because, I need to find somebody else that understands what I'm talking about, when I'm talking about the way that my mother talked to me and how I want to change and be a different way.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I struggle with that. And I think that some people around me struggle with it because, and oh, well, this gets into the add water, just add water and stir, is that there's kind of, I think, a part of the story that outsiders, and by outsiders I mean non-adoptive families, and this is a part of where I guess I'm slipping into talking about adoption culture, is that it's not an add water and stir situation.
Right.
I mean, it just never is. It just never is. And some situations may be easier than others, and I even kind of flinch a little bit in saying easy, but it's a really different path, and there are things that I hate saying we can't do, but there are legal things I think that we can't do, and ways of parenting kids, particularly kids of trauma, that a lot of, like, my parents didn't have to deal with, they just didn't. There were things that we did. They had the look that
Right.
was followed by the kind of situation, and those. I might can have the look, but it has to be a different kind of look. It's rooted in all kinds of different things. You have to think about attachment, and just things that I think bio parents aren't necessarily dealing with in a way that adoptive families are, and because of that, it's kind of behind the veil. People don't understand some of the things that we have to do in raising our kids. And so, I mean, I know that there are times where Hope has issues with anxiety. And so, and I remember one time we went out and I had not figured out that I needed like a first aid anxiety kit.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it was like all hell broke loose. Like, I mean, there was crying at the table. People are like, "What's happening? Like, what happened? Like, we're just having pizza. Like, what's going on?" And
Right.
and I was like, "It's just too much for her." And I don't have silly putty. I don't have a stress ball. I don't have gum. The phone battery is dead. She can't play a game. Like, we are like falling apart at
We
the
out
seams here.
here. Out
Like,
here.
we're just out, and this is about to like really get real. And so, and people don't understand, well, why can't she just get it together? Why isn't she happy? You're a great person.
Mhm.
She's lucky.
And I think to add to what you're saying is people may look at the way we parent too and judge that, particularly in our community, because what looks to them like misbehavior might feel different to us, right?
Yeah.
So even though Nana is only 2, I still have to remember that I don't know what happened to her in those
Mm,
2 years.
yeah.
And while we kind of think about a child, she's 2, she probably doesn't remember, but her body remembers, right? Her brain remembers.
Yeah.
So things that I the times when she's anxious about me walking out the room without saying I'll be right back, that's triggered by something else. It's
Yeah.
not something that she learned
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And I think people, and our families included, may judge us for it and they may say we're coddling too much or things like that, but they don't understand that story. And particularly because, well, we've been taking care of other people's children who have been impacted for trauma, and we have not changed the way that we deal with them, right? So, because we didn't know anything about it or never thought about it, or we thought we could pray it away, whatever our reasons were, we haven't incorporated that into our parenting style.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the other thing is, what's not said is you're parenting like white people. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it.
That's the real that's
I'm gonna keep
reality.
it real. I'm gonna keep it real. There are people around us in our community that are like, that timeout stuff don't work. Like, why are you doing timeouts?
Exactly. Like, you
you
don't
know?
want her? Well, no, I don't. Well, first of all, I can go to jail for spanking her. So
Right. I
that's
mean,
the
like,
first thing. First and
I
foremost.
right, right. I mean, and of course I don't want to, but as I joke with my sister, I was like, I have signed 3 pieces of paper saying that I won't. So,
Hmm.
so, you know, but I'm just gonna keep it real that that's one of the unspoken kind of judgment pieces is like, okay, well, we're taking on things that are not culturally nuanced in our community about kind of raising kids, and I do think that that's a bit different, and I do think that that's something that um, makes it difficult to talk about um, um, adoption in
Right.
our community because the parenting pieces are different. And I just got our congratulations box from Hope's social worker, which I thought was going to be okay. Like, there was a stuffed animal and some candy and stuff, and then there was like 12 parenting books, like on attachment and stuff. And I kind of was like, I felt kind of bad because, Hope opened the box, and I wish that those things had either been in a box inside the box or sent separately, because then it
Hmm.
was like, okay, there's like 5 pieces of candy, one stuffed animal, and a life book for her, and like 12 parenting books because clearly she is so difficult. That's the
Right.
message that was sent to her.
Mhm.
And
You need
so,
all of that. Yeah.
you know, and so it's a little bit challenging. Um, so we are at 10:46. I want to talk a little bit about frequently asked questions. So, what do people ask you about your adoption journey?
Well, since we're still in the foster care phase, you know, uh, what I normally get are stories. Less questions, more stories about how they knew Miss Jenkins, who used to take care of all these kids for money, and how her kids were bad and all this stuff. And so I feel like the underlying thing that they're saying is maybe there's a question there, which is your child going to be bad too? Because I think when people hear about foster care, there's an assumption that kids are in foster care because they did something wrong,
Mm,
instead of understanding it's because the parent was not able to parent them at the time.
mhm,
And so there's automatically an assumption that there's going to be something wrong with your child. They're going to have behavior problems that are outside the norm or that would be different than what we possibly would have had if I had my own biological children, right? So although it's not a question, I still feel like a little slight in there, about the stories about all these people who did it for money and who didn't watch their kids, and the kids were bad behaving children.
yeah.
So that's mainly what I get.
Um, yeah, I have gotten some of those, Miss Jenkins. Well, or
Why
rather,
why does her name have to be Miss
Miss
Jenkins though?
Jenkins.
Okay,
We're sorry to any of the like
Miss Jenkins, we are sorry.
Jenkins, Jackson, surnamed folks. The ubiquitous Black people name, but 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 I get some of those, and you're right. There is this kind of piece where either the ethics of the foster parent are brought into question, like you're doing it for money,
Right.
or yeah, there's a kind of dark cloud over this kid who is a bad kid. So apparently they don't want them. So then they have to go to the unethical foster
Right.
family.
The money part I just brush off like, surely. What? I know you don't think I'm doing this for money. So, and the reality of the financial piece of this is this around 20 something dollars a day. That is not a lot of money when you talk about raising a child and buying clothes and food and activities and daycare and all those things. So, um, I don't think people really understand that either.
Mm. Well, I get two big questions, and the first one is it expensive? So I'll talk about that one first. But is it expensive? Especially since I went through a private agency, and
Mhm.
it wasn't. I mean, certainly I think that it was probably a bit more expensive than if I had gone through foster. I mean, but I paid probably the same as for pride classes as everybody else, and all of the paperwork and the home study. And there were some additional fees that my agency had because of the support wraparound that they have. And the agency that I used, they do all of the matching for me, which they'll let you do the matching if you want to be really involved. But I was like, well, y'all are going to make me pay the money either way, right? Y'all are the professionals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I am deferential. Like, you can take care of that. And so, but I mean, it was not expensive. It was not expensive. And I will say that it wasn't expensive for me. But I also recognize that the people that I do see, the people of color that I do see, seem to be of, a bit more affluent,
Right.
than kind of what the street narrative is for foster families or adoptive families of color. What my experience and the reality has been a bit more affluent. We're not talking about the international stuff, because
Right.
the fees those people pay, just God bless them.
Or domestic infant adoption too.
Yeah, domestic infant adoption. I was never in that game. But the other question that I get that is always surprisingly intimate question is like, well, what happened to her?
Yes.
And I'm just
Yes.
like, and how was your hysterectomy? Like, why do you think there's any of your dang business?
Right.
And people feel very entitled, I guess, to ask, very comfortable and entitled to ask about my child's history. And even when you give them a polite, like, Nunya, they will continue to go in because, and I can find no other reason than morbid curiosity. Like, really, when you think about what has happened to some of the kids in the system and some of their experiences, do you really want to hear that? I mean, like, it's not,
Mm-hmm.
do you really want to hear that?
Well, I get the same question. Mine is posed like, do you know, well, you just said, do you know what happened to her? Or do you know her story? And usually I kind of deflect, right? So like, oh, that's a long story. I don't want to get into it. But I don't get very much pushback from that. So that's the good thing about it. But I wonder, again, is it an underlying question there? Like, is your child damaged?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really what I'm trying to find out. Is your child damaged? Is she okay for me to ask for a play day? Or is she going to come and bring a whole host of issues with her? So, it could just be just natural curiosity, but I do
Mm-hmm.
feel like there's other pieces, because the narrative about foster kids is that they're throwaways,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Somebody didn't want them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
It
don't think
is.
that's not the actuality of the
Oh gosh.
situation in most
No.
cases.
No. I mean, I do think that it is curiosity, and I think that it is, and I think that there is an assessment piece there. What's interesting to me, and again, maybe this is just more of a social commentary on just how nosy society is that when you deflect and you're trying to be polite, that people persist. And I had a situation a couple months ago where, you know, I do a lot of work on diversity. I do diversity work in my daytime life, and I've been working on projects related to LGBT issues for a couple of years. And I was chatting with someone at a conference, and we were talking about trans issues, and it was a great conversation and stuff. We were talking about Laverne Cox from Orange is the New Black, and how it was awful that Katie Couric a few months ago asked her,
Right.
does she still have her parts?
Right.
And so, and this person was like, oh my God, I can't believe she was asking that. It was so rude. And da, da, da. I am so excited to hear about your adoption. So what happened to her? And I was like, didn't you just say you was mad because somebody asked about Laverne Cox's parts? Like, well, step off.
You know what? as you're talking, what made me think is too, we don't always think about children as people, you know. So their story is their story. It's not mine to share. My family doesn't even know her story because
Mhm.
I do not want her one day running around the kitchen with the cousins, someone, you know,
Sure.
talking about, so and her finding something out or having people talk about her story without her
Sure.
approval.
Mhm.
Um, so I think sometimes people don't think about this is a person that you're
Mm.
asking their information. It's no different than asking me about my own personal information, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Personhood, little personhood. Huh. That's a good good drop of knowledge there, Mimi. So, and just wrapping up, give us a recommendation that we think would be you think would be useful to our listeners, viewers.
I want to
You have
shout
to-
out. I think we have a viewer. I see down at the bottom we have a viewer. I don't know who it is, but shout out to our viewer. If you can get into the chat room, send us a little chat and say hi if you can. But my recommendation, speaking of personhood and speaking of um, non-normative parenting practices for my particular background, I'm recommending a web page. It's called www.janetlansbury.com, and she actually articulates some of my thoughts about personhood in children because I'm really trying to remember that Nana is a person. She has feelings and thoughts, and I talked about that on my blog a couple of days ago about how she might have been having a bad day, and I needed to make space and room for that. But Janet Lansbury, she's a student of Magna Gerber. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but
Mm,
Magna Gerber has a philosophy about respect for infants and toddlers as
mm,
persons, and that they're immature, but they're still complete human beings, and we want to nurture their own self-initiating agenda, and all this sounds very foreign to me, but it allows me to give Nana space to kind of explore on her own, and
yeah.
to make some of the decisions on her own instead of acting upon her. And
Mm,
so it's kind of helped me rethink some of the ways that I do some parenting. So that's
awesome.
janetlansbury.com.
Awesome.
What
Awesome.
about you? What are you recommending?
So I wrote a blog a couple months maybe a month or so ago about all the stupid books that I've picked up. But the one that that has stuck with me over the last couple of months has been by Heather Forbes, and it's Beyond Consequences, Logic and Control. And so if you're thinking about adoption, if you're thinking about and even if you're not, even just kind of thinking about childhood development, this is an it's a really interesting look at the science and kind of how you parent to the science of brain development, and how children who have experienced trauma tend to have different PET scans, their neuroscience development is different, and all of those kinds of things. And so there are times when I found myself kind of thinking about why, like, she's 12, she's 13, like why are we, I don't understand why we're having this conversation. It's like, or not having this conversation. And it really is because developmentally there is some issues that she just literally cannot deal
Right,
with what's happening in that moment. And Heather Forbes talks a lot about that, and how do you then help nurture that development, especially in older child adoption. How do you help nurture that so that you can get to that space, so that you can help kids get back on track with the brain development? Because the brain is an amazing organ, able to repath itself and reroute itself and grow new neurons and blah blah blah. So definitely check out Heather Forbes. She's got a great website, Beyond Consequences, as well. So,
okay. I think I need to get that book because Nana's moving into the no stage, and it is working. She's trying it. Trying it. I told you about the Mew Mew Mew.
yeah.
So I think we need to close this out. We're
Yes.
coming
All
up
right.
to the hour. So where can you be
Thanks.
found?
I am on WordPress, Adoptive Black Mom, WordPress.com, and I'm on Twitter at Adoptive Black Mom as well. You can find a Twitter button, I think, on my blog, and yeah, peep me there.
You can find me at Complicated Melody. That's Melody with an I. So complicatedmelody.wordpress.com. And I'm on Twitter, but not really. But you can get me at Twitter at Mimi Complex. So
Yeah.
I think we've come to the top of the hour. It's our
Yeah.
first podcast.
Wow.
I know.
That was cool. So we'll see everybody in maybe about 2 weeks. I think that is, let's see, when is that? It looks like July 10th.
10th. July
Yeah.
10th. All right.
So definitely tweet us if you have some ideas for things for us to talk about too.
Thanks for listening.
All right. Take care. Bye.